John Talty and Armin Katayan have teamed up to write a book called The Price, and it is on newsstands August 27th. I've got myself an advanced copy. It is very eye-opening. These are two of the best at what they do. And there is a story from this book making the rounds. And the story, you may not be surprised to learn, is about Nick Saban and his time with former offensive coordinator Lane Kiffin. Now, Nick Saban is as diplomatic as it comes and was when he was a coach. You never heard him throw his staff under the bus. But that does not mean it was very harmonious at all times behind the scenes. So there is a quote from a story, and there's kind of a paraphrased version of the story that's making the rounds from some folks who got an advanced copy of this book. And it's basically explaining how during Kiffin's tenure, he had the same agent, as he still does, as Nick Saban, Jimmy Sexton. They're both repped by CAA. CAA has a lot of the big clients from the head coaching perspective in the SEC. So I will explain to you what I think is the biggest perceived gap in perception and reality. So perception and reality don't always match in a lot of ways. But I've intimated this before with you guys, but I'm going to go a little deeper tonight. The perception versus the reality of how hires are made in college football could not be any more different. There is a world that normal fans think exists when it comes to hires. And then there's the actual way that hires happen. And these two do not touch. These two do not touch at all. And frankly, I think it would disappoint a lot of you, the way that hires actually happen in this sport. And it has a lot to do. I mean, a lot to do with who you're represented by. I don't think that's a surprise to you guys. I think what the surprise is when a head coach needs to backfill a defensive line position, it's not that head coach, flipping through the Rolodex or going to his memory bank for all of the years and years and years of relationships and wisdom that he has acquired, and he's not going through film evaluating candidates. He is calling his agent, or he's answering a call from his agent who's beat him to it, and he's getting a list sent to him. And it's basically, here's the ones you can pick from, and that's how it happens. Even with Nick Saban, that's how it happened. And so it's detailed in this story how Jimmy Sexton talked Nick Saban into giving Lane Kiffin a shot. And Lane Kiffin was Lane Kiffin, and so that's where the story picks up. And Saban is on the phone calling Jimmy Sexton every name in the book, threatening to fire him for ever sending this expletive to my coaching staff. And that kind of went on for a while. And famously, Saban fired Kiffin the week of the national championship game. Okay, that's how bad it got. And then Lane Kiffin leaves and he goes on to do what he does. And now he's the head coach at Ole Miss, and they may very well win the SEC this year for all we know. And any time that they've publicly spoken about each other, it's always been very cordial. It wasn't all that way behind the scenes. So, once upon a time, I came here to this company, but before that, I was working in local news down in Columbus, Georgia. So I loved college football my whole life. I finally get myself from radio to TV, and I'm in position where I can get credentialed to go to games. So the first times that I ever got to really be around Nick Saban's Alabama were the mid-20 teens. So 2014, 2015, 2016 comes around, and they're in the SEC championship game. And Lane Kiffin is the offensive coordinator there. And this is the last year that he was the OC there. And I think they played Florida or Missouri. I can't remember who it was, but they won the game. But leading up to the game, there were all these rumors about Kiffin. And was he going to take this job or that job? The LSU job, I think, was coming open. And so there were a lot of rumors. Okay, so no one knew what to believe as far as the external. No one knew what to believe. But Lane Kiffin's name was a very hot commodity. So Kiffin had made a promise. There was a report that there was a promise that he made to Saban that he wasn't going to talk to any other school until after the SEC championship game. So the game happens. I'm on the field for it. And it's one of the first SEC championship games I got to cover. I think I was there the first couple of years, so that may have been the third one. But, the whole world's still kind of new to me from that perspective. I walk off the field after the celebration and everything. I walk off the field. I'm walking down a tunnel. It's the same tunnel as Bama goes down to go to their locker room. Jimmy Sexton's standing right there. He is standing there, and I kid you not, he has a phone in his hand. He's got the full hand over the speaker. He is waiting for Lane Kiffin to come off the field. He has a phone call that his client needs to take. And so Kiffin grabs the phone as he walks off the field. I can't prove to you who he's talking to. I can pretty well prove to you what that was in conjunction with, because Kiffin ended up taking, I think, the FAU job a month or so later. I walked down the tunnel, and I had my iJosh with me at the time. I snapped a picture, just in case you guys didn't believe this. I just kept it with me until a couple of years ago I tweeted it out, and I didn't really go much further into detail. This is it. If you're listening on a podcast, we have Jimmy Sexton looking at his other phone, and we have Lane Kiffin on the phone that Sexton has just handed him, talking to who knows who. But that wasn't the part that stood out to me. The part that stood out to me is Nick Saban is represented by this same man. And it was the first time I ever saw how this dynamic works. I see the game on the field, and then I see the post game, and Vern and Gary say goodbye, and that's my exposure to the sport, just like yours, up until a few years before this point. But now you're seeing the sausage get made behind the scenes. Now you're seeing the inner workings. So here was what was wild to me. So me knowing Saban's repped by Sexton just like Lane Kiffin is, Nick Saban walks down the tunnel, walks right past both of them, and no eye contact is made. Not a word is said. And me knowing full well, that's his agent too. And I'm thinking, wow, what a massive, awkward conflict of interest this may be. Except Jimmy Sexton's standing there and might as well have yawned and pulled a toothpick out from behind his ear and put it in. It's just like standard operating procedure for him. So then Saban walks back out the locker room because he has to go to the post-game press conference. And I followed him because I just wanted to see what happens here. Like, what does this look like? He gets done. He walks back to the locker room. They're still standing there. He walks back by both of them again doesn't say a word to either one of them. And then they're ready to go, okay? Because the way this works is in these championship games, it takes a little longer. So the coach has a trophy presentation, and then you've got post-game obligations with a network. At that time, it would have been CBS. And then you've got your post-game press conference, which is going to be extended because they talk to the losing coach and the winning coach. And so what's happening with your players during that time is they're getting showered, they're getting dressed, they're grabbing their Chick-fil-A box, and they're getting on the buses. So the buses are ready to go. By the time Nick Saban gets done with his press conference, he goes in there, he may shower, he changes into his suit to travel in, he's ready to go. Lane Kiffin's not ready to go. Nowhere close to ready to go because he's been on the phone the entire time. I'm just standing there watching all this. It's theater. It's great. So Ellis Ponder, who ended up being a long time like right-hand man for Nick Saban, he's still at Alabama. He was the DFO, chief operating officer for a long time. He may have already been the DFO, if not the assistant DFO. But his role is to make sure everyone gets out of here, everyone gets on the bus, because we got to get back over to Hartsfield, we got to fly back to Tuscaloosa, and he works for essentially someone who gets pissed off if there is a second wasted here or there. And so it's a very, very heat-seeking position that he's had over there for a long time. And it is really not synced up at all with having to manage someone like Lane Kiffin. So I watch him tell Kiffin 2 or 3 times, you got to get showered, you got no time, you got to get on the bus. Then it turns into you don't have time to shower, you got to get on the bus. And this was my first real peek as to how Lane Kiffin operated on a little different wavelength than everyone else. Ellis finally yells at him, it's time to get on the bus, we got to go. Everyone else is on the bus. Kiffin says, okay. Ellis Ponder turns his back. Lane runs in the locker room and jumps in the shower. I believe he got left at the building that night. I believe that's one of the times they had to leave him at the stadium. So I watched all this happen, and it was like my first real indoctrination into how these organizations, even the ones that are operating at the highest level, like Alabama. Alabama's the #1 program in the country here. They're coming off a national title. They're about to get within a second of another national championship. Kiffin's going to get fired as the OC the week before the national title game. It just goes to show you, you hear all these rumors about these teams that go 4-8 and how their staff is a mess and how there's all kind of discontent. It was like that at Alabama. They just won anyway. So if you want to know how great Nick Saban is, it's not all the titles he won. It's he dealt with some of the same mess and actually dealt with a lot of consequences from his success above and beyond what his peers dealt with, and he won anyway. It never dropped off. Alabama never dropped from being the top program in the country, and that was fascinating. So, the book is called The Price. It's by John Talty and Armin Katayan, and it will be out August 27th, which I believe is the same day that Connor Stallion's documentary drops. One has nothing to do with the other.